So the recording is started. Let me share screen 2. All right. Well,
Hi.
welcome. Welcome, everybody. We'll go ahead and get moving here. Hopefully I have everything set up. I'm distracted today because I have a bunch of guys working on the street outside. So I've been watching people pour concrete and cut concrete for days. It's been fun. Okay, kind of a checkpoint of where we're at with this class. We're actually a couple weeks behind because Module 4 turned out to be a whole lot longer than we expected. It took a couple weeks. And then on Module 5, we didn't complete that last week. So we're still in reviewing Module 5. And I think we'll be able to wrap that up today and start jumping into Module 6. And then there's really not much in Module 7. So between this week and next week, we probably should be able to catch up, depending on what type of conversations that we have and stuff. So, if you have questions, definitely bring them up. I don't think we really had a lab at the end of last time. We're going to talk a lot about business intelligence, the time functions that they have today. Make sure that you saw that Slack message come up on my window. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Join us in our Slack channel. Michelle, do you want to put a link out to the invite to the Slack channel? Put that in our chat.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So that anybody that hasn't joined this yet will go ahead and join. But this is where we put links to the previous recordings, and you can always come up with questions here, to help support you through this class or this whatever we want to call it. All right, let's jump into where we left off. Last time we were talking about Calculate. I think we actually talked about this slide, but it's probably a good refresher to go back through, right? These are the steps that Calculate uses when you're doing it, right? When you use Calculate, right? So we have the expression. With the expression could be some long expression. It could also be a measure, to reuse a measure. And then everything after that is filters, right? And actually all the filters somehow get changed into tables one way or another. But the steps that Calculate goes through is it takes its own copy of the current filter context. It applies any new filters that are put onto this filter condition. Then it applies any update, ignore of existing filters, right? So those are the DAX functions that help modify the filters. So things like all, keep filters, remove filters, those all get applied in this step. Yeah, go ahead.
And just to be really precise, when we say new filters, we mean a filter that refers to a column or a field that is not already filtered on.
Right. So the copy in the current filter context is the filter context that's coming in from the query, right?
And a filter context is a set of fields and constraints on those fields, right?
It's like whatever you have on your visual.
Right.
Right.
So, but I just mean, sorry.
Yeah, if you think about it from what Power BI is building for you, it's what you have in slicers. Mm-hmm. It's what you have in the filters pane, but it also could be like when you click on a particular row, right? And that's filtering another visual, mm-hmm. right? It could be filtered down to that row.
So if your new filter is like a conjunctive thing, if it's like, field A is this and field B is that, and one of them is in the current filter context and the other is not, that still counts as a new filter because one is not in the, I'm just trying to think of really precisely, what does it mean for a filter to be new? And I don't know if that's worth, maybe it's a sidebar.
Yeah, it's probably a side. I mean, when you get into like whether it's an and an or, if something's mm-hmm. already in there, mm-hmm. right? Because it's remember what happens is if with it, that whatever is new, I think in this is what you're expressing here, right? Because these filter that are here could be brand new could be filter context that you're adding in the calculate, or they could be those other reserved words for modifying the filter context.
I mean,
so,
like all?
like all,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Or remove filters,
Okay.
right? And so this is telling you the order that it's doing it through, because it does it in these steps, in this order, which could be important to know, right? So it's going to add anything new from these filter parameters that you pass to it. Then it's going to apply those modifiers.
Okay.
That,
No,
then it's going to convert, if there is a need to convert a row context to a filter context, like in a calculated column, it's going to do that that row context to filter context next. So like I mean, I'd have to test your exact scenario. I can't tell you like if you're using the or, using the and. If a column is filtered in the original context and you also include it in yours, you're overriding that. So I think even with that or the and, you're going to still override it. But I'd have to test.
Okay. No, and thanks for, I mean,
sure.
thanks for getting into it, but I don't want to hold this up.
Okay. Then step 5, it's going to and all of those filter contexts, the filter conditions together to create a new filter context. Then it's going to, the last thing it does, or second last thing it does, is evaluate the expression with the new filter context. And then it's going to return back to the original filter context, which is why it made a copy of it in the first place. And then that's how it knows what value to pass back from calculate, right? Because calculate's going to return back a single value. So these steps are, you know, if you're running into problems with things, you may need to come back and look at these steps and think through it when you're getting into some complicated DAX, okay? But it's good to remember there is an order to the operations. All right, so this is exactly where we left off last week. And this is introducing the time intelligence that exists in DAX. And there's a lot of helper functions, right? Some people call them sugar syntax, but they provide a lot of functions that will save you time. And for the most part, they work and they work really well. But if you get into some deeper things, I'd encourage you to go read a little bit more to what the SQL BI folks have put out with their patterns and things like that, because they do come up with some cases to where the ones provided by Microsoft either don't perform well, or in some cases you need to modify it to actually do something a little bit different, right? But the concept is to, you know, use these functions first. The majority of the time they're going to work for you, okay? So like in this case, I like what they say here is there's an app for that. And I was like, I don't know what app you're talking about. But in this, if we think about our sales year to date, so they're going to do a calculate of total sales, and then they're going to use this time intelligence function that is dates year to date, and all you got to do is pass it your date dimension. So what this is actually doing right behind the scenes, because we know this is a filter, this function returns a table of dates from the beginning of the year to the current date based upon what's in the date dimension. So you could do kind of a similar thing with a dates between or whatever. This is just a whole lot simpler, and to understand again what it's doing, think about what the function is returning, and then that list of dates just becomes your new filter context. Okay. And then that's going to be the same through all of these examples. So here, what they're really wanting us to come out with is understanding what time intelligence functions exist so that you can write the shortcut.
Can I just ask?
Case,
sorry.
Yeah, go
well,
ahead.
just in this example, like thinking about the whole calculate, and let's say you already had some dates selected. If I don't really remember yet because I don't have the slides in front of me, but this will replace the date selection that was already there with this one. Like if you already had a slicer on dates and you had previously selected like February, this will wipe that out just temporarily for the calculation of what you selected February, and it'll just pull the previous month.
For this measure, and for this measure only.
Okay.
Right, not, so like if you have a visual that's like a bar chart and you put total sales, and right next to it, you put total sales previous month, the second bar is showing what the sales for the previous month was based upon the same date in, slicing, right? If you think, again, if we think about, it's easier to think about in a matrix, right? Because each cell of that matrix is being calculated. So it's what's the intersection point in that cell. So if across the columns you have dates, right? And say you have products down on the rows, each intersection, you're going to have a single date. And this is the easiest way to think about it. You'll have a single date that it'll calculate total sales, and it'll also calculate previous total sales. So the previous month, it's just going to take 1 month, and it'll be for that one date. But now if you roll that up to the entire month, your calculation in cell for total sales has a table which is going to be all the dates for a particular month. So the cell next to it, which is going to be previous month, is just going to take all those dates and move it 1 month back. That help or make it more confusing?
I think, I mean, it's good. It's something that I kind of feel like I want to like do as my own demo, unless we do a demo of, having slicers that are picking out some of these things, and then seeing how this will disregard the slicer to give you, because I'm just thinking if I had a slicer and let's say I only showed February and March, like in my matrix you're talking about, and I had that selected.
Yeah, but it's not ignoring your slicer. Your slicer is still in context.
Okay.
Right? Because your slicer is still slicing what the dates are for. But for this one measure, right, it's modifying the date range. It's still using what the slicer has sliced or the visual has sliced, as it's when you get to that calculating that particular cell, what are the dates that are in scope, the date or dates in scope for that calculation, right? And then this is going to override it and move it back 1 month.
Yeah.
So your slicer is still impacting that. Because if your slicer is at a year level or your slicer is at a month level, to say it's at a month, it's saying all of the dates are only for the month of April.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then the previous month for April is March, right? And so it's going to take all of those dates that are done for making April and move it back for March.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
This is Michelle. I had a quick question. So, because this is kind of like right where I'm at with my DAX understanding, and I'm also behind in our class here, so you may have already answered this. But when I try to do these, like where you've got total sales, I calculate total sales. The value there in the brackets, does that have to be an established measure, or can I just grab some number field?
No, you could put an expression here. So if I wanted to, like if total sales as a measure was defined as sum of sales amount, I could put sum of sales amount right here.
Okay, So that can be any number thing. It doesn't matter whether I created a measure or a calculated column. It can be whatever natively came through with my data.
It's any valid expression,
Okay.
right? And so that expression could be a measure. It could be a whole nother, you know, bigger set of columns, right? You could even say calculate, you know, you're going to want it. The only thing is it's going to have to come out to one value, right? Because calculate has to return just the one value. But I could say sum of, in my sum, I could say sum unit quantity times price to figure out what my own sales amount was if I didn't even have sales amount in my data, right? Or I could make that simple because I know I'm going to use that over and over again. I create a measure and then reuse it.
Gotcha.
That's kind of a good best practice instead of having the calculation multiple times, because if something ever, you know, it just helps maintenance on it. So it could be any expression.
Thank you.
So then here, what it's trying to show is, right, you're going to show month over month, right? So you're using the measure with the time intelligence of previous month here. So again, if we're getting sales for April minus the sales for March, and then we divide it by the sales for March, that's going to give our month over month percentage change. Okay. And, you know, this will calculate, like I said, April. This will calculate March because it has this previous in it. What this is it's showing here is, you know, so Michelle, this is kind of like what you were just talking about. This is where the measure was before, but now this is a different valid expression. And so what they're doing here, sometimes the distinct count can be very slow. So one way of doing it is you sum up the value 1 for a table. And in this case, the table is the values that you have for customer ID. And that'll give you all of the customer IDs that are currently in scope, or that are in scope based upon these filters and the other filters you have on there, right? So here it's removing any filter from the date dimension, the entire table, so that it could apply its own. Then it's going to do dates and period for the date dimension on the date. And it's also going to have a filter on the date. It's going to pick the last date that's in our date dimension. I'm not sure why. Here it seems like they're making it as previous month, but they're not labeling it this. So I'd have to actually kind of run this somewhere and see what it's doing.
What does the dates and period do? What is that function?
Let's go look it up.
Okay. And the other thing is the thing you mentioned about distinct count and values, and that distinct count can be slower. Is that one of those things that the guys, I forget what, the guys from Italy, I don't remember what their
SQL BI.
Yeah. Did they do some performance on that? Because it's funny, it seems like it's the same kind of challenge, because values is going to come up with a distinct list of values, and distinct count is going to have to count the distinct values. I don't know why one is so much slower than the other. Anyway,
so the SQL BI guys, right? They're not Microsoft, so they wouldn't be doing any of the performance. These DAX functions are provided by Microsoft, but those guys work closely with Microsoft on everything, and they do a whole lot of testing, so they know what's faster. Why one is slower than the other is an implementation reason that only Microsoft knows.
Okay.
So, but here, dates and period, it says it returns the dates from a given period. Not a great description. That's what we had over here, right? Was dates and period.
Yeah, we're only giving it one argument, right?
Oh, you know what?
Oh, I
This
didn't
is,
read this. I'm sorry.
if
I didn't catch it.
I didn't catch it either.
Oh,
This is where if they would have formatted this a whole lot better.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's terrible.
yeah, if this was indented,
Yeah.
like the way you should do it,
Yeah.
now it makes sense.
Now it makes sense.
Because this is all one function. And because they're missing a parenthesis as well. That's the other thing that threw me off.
No. Oh, yeah. No. Well, no. The one
Oh
at the
no,
end
wait,
calculates
maybe
on
they're
the next
not.
line.
Okay,
Yeah, because
yeah.
the next line has the calculate. But yeah, that is whew.
Yeah, so it takes in dates as a table. Let me see if I can get these two on the screen correctly. That wasn't a good way of doing it. Bring it over this way. And this one. Okay. So dates and period takes in the dates. So a column reference containing the dates. So that's this.
That's kind of like the input.
And then
that
it
you're
takes
gonna
in
filter.
your start date and then the number of intervals and what the interval is. So the start date's going to be the last date that's in the current context from the date it's being passed in minus 1 month. So it's going to get, so that's how it's going to get you all the dates in the current month, is by using this method. So if you're in the, it's going to be monthly active users. And if you're doing this for a particular month, right, this is going to pick up the last day of the month and it's going to tell you minus 1 month, and it's going to go back to the beginning of the month for it.
But this doesn't give you the last, it doesn't go 30 days back? But I'm confused. What does it mean? I mean, this is the semantics of dates and period. Maybe that's not that interesting, but if it's minus 1 month, I would think would be like from the 5th of May to the 5th of April. I didn't read the page.
Yeah, well, again, I think when I said it, I made an assumption of what the visual looks like, right? Because I would want to do a visual that would have monthly active users. I'd have one of the column, right? One of the points on it. Like I would have either the one axis, that's the word I was looking for. One of my axes would be month, right? Like year, month, or something like that. So then that's how I would get all the dates within a month. But you're
Gotcha.
right. If your axis, it was simply just the date itself. Now you're going to get that one date. It'll be the last. I'd have to kind of compare it to see what happens when you do it for one. I think it would be that 30-day time period, right? But I would name the measure differently. I wouldn't call it monthly. So,
Right.
But yes, you're, again, test the different scenarios the way you plan on doing it. But the idea, this looks a whole lot better just by indenting. Formatting, and the SQL BI guys have another good video that just came out on formatting again. So
I guess, and the other thing, I'm sorry, does someone else have a question? I just keep asking questions.
I think you're
Okay.
fine.
I'll keep it. So the use of all here, and this is where I kind of get to, like, we just were talking about how, oh, I see. In the previous example, if we did not have all, so the filters that we added on dates were combined essentially with the filters that were inherited or brought into the current filter context. They were the new filters under dates and period, which is a new filter, right? It's like an update. Dates and period is like an update to whatever's currently filtered. But here we wipe out the whatever's coming in as the filter context on date and then apply the dates and
Yeah,
period.
but it's not going to happen in this step here. This is going to run independently, but this is for the overall running of the expression. It's going to take it's going to remove all the filters off a date. But this is going to use what's currently, right? So here's what I think would happen is if I did this on a visual that had every single individual date on it, for every date in that month, I would get the exact same number. Because it's the number of users active in that month. And you're removing the filter context on date here, even though I'm getting
Understand, yeah.
the 6th of May, right? This is going to provide me a list of dates. And again, this is where I'm a little confused. You may be right here. It may be going back 30 days. We could go run this over on dax.duo if we want to kind of see what happens on it. Let's try to get through some stuff and then we can do that, right?
All right, sure.
But I mean, you guys tell me, would you rather me continue down the slides, or do you want to, I could go to dax.do and we could start trying to debug what this is doing.
I would say do that, Kevin.
Okay, let's try that.
That's just my vote, but
One
Okay,
vote
well,
is good enough for me.
That's good enough for me too. Thanks, Sheila.
Amin, it's the second vote because Amin has his vote too.
Oh, and we have in the chat, someone said, yeah, go the debug route.
Okay.
Knock on.
All right. So hopefully you guys have kind of seen this site. It's built by what we affectionately called it the Italians, the SQL BI guys. So we could come in here and define measure. And we have to base it off of a table. So we're going to go off of customer. And we'll call it our monthly active users. And then I should just be able to copy all of this in. Okay, and then off of that, we should be able to do an evaluate.
I can't see.
Oh, you can't see with dark mode?
Oh, I didn't know that was out loud.
No, that's fine. If you can't see, let me know so I can make
No,
it.
it was on my end. I had to make it 100%, not 50, but I didn't know I said that out loud.
Okay.
busted.
All right. Actually, let me go up here as well. These little dots I don't like. I'm going to get rid of them. I think it was something that pasted over poorly from. Okay.
Does this have an indenter? This tool?
It's gonna format it all. It copied it over exactly as I had it there, but let me get to a point here. Let me just do this so that I don't get syntax errors. But I could do format here, and it formats it for me.
That's very cool. I don't remember.
So here it
So-
did it all on,
Yeah.
put it all in the same line, right?
What is evaluate for? I'm sorry. I know this is one.
So in things like DAX Studio, or when you're actually running DAX, or if you look at the statements that that Power BI put together for you in the performance analyzer, evaluate is here's the query, right? So up here you're doing define, and you could define different things, measures, variables, other type of things, right? I think there's now columns, tables, that. Mostly you're going to do measures and variables up here. And then evaluate is going to be your query that's actually using all of these things.
Okay.
So I'm going to do var, I'm going to call it date filter equals Oh, that's interesting, the way that it highlights that. Okay, so let's do it for, let's filter on calendar year. So I'm going to say, this is nice because I could preview the data. Oh, okay, I would have never thought of it being that way. Okay.
So you had loaded into
Hey.
previously into DAX-Do the Lunchbox PBIX.
No,
How
this
does
is
it know?
this is the data model they always use.
Oh,
Everybody uses this Conseco data model.
okay, gotcha.
Yep. So I'm going to do treat as quote CY 2011, and it's going to treat that as this calendar year. Okay. So now if I say summarize columns, and I want to group by calendar year month, and I want to have our oh, I need my filter table, right? Yeah, filter table is next. I'm going to rename this to be, I don't know why it keeps coming up white there, but I'm going to put in my filter table. You could put in multiples if you want. And then I'm going to say, quote, I'll just call it users to make it easy. And it's going to be this. I think that's my correct syntax. Yeah, it formatted, so that means my syntax passes. And now I can run this, and something didn't work. Oh, because they used the presentation used date dim, but in this they call it just date. So I need to get rid of that. We do run. So we got sales. They call it customer key. See, so it doesn't totally work. See if that runs now. Oh, this is one you would think I would get to know by now. The first thing is a table that has to be pushed into that.
Treat as is a, what is it?
It's a way to okay, so here it's saying it's got me 0 rows. It treat as is saying, here's a table. And in this case, it's a single column, single row table. And I want you to treat it as this column calendar year. So it's actually doing the filtering of it.
So it's a year filter for calendar 20, whatever that is, 11. Okay.
Yeah, because that's the values that they happen to have in this. When
Okay.
I told it to show me what this looks like.
Right, their strengths.
Right. Yep. Let's move it back to see. I don't know why there's not any data. All right, let's just try this. Let's see, I think I could just give it a value of 1. Okay, so I'm getting something there, but when I use my measure, it doesn't calculate out anything. So nothing comes back. So that means every time that this is running, it's coming back and it's blank. So now we would work on how to debug all of that. And that was one way that I just kind of did it there, right? Is I like to narrow down where I'm having a problem. So let's change this.
What is the dates? You think it's the dates and period filter is somehow returning an empty set? Like there's no dates?
No, that's definitely returning dates, right? Because I could change this to 1 and I get values.
But
But remember what happens is when your measure is blank, you're not gonna, like if I put blank here and I just always return blank, all of those are gonna come back. It comes back with no data as well. So what that's telling me is that this measure is always returning blank. And I have to try to figure out why.
okay.
Um,
And but that measure would return blank probably if the filters that were applied in the calculate didn't have, they selected no rows. It was like a filter that picked up nothing. Is that correct? Is that why it would give?
well, I mean, that's possible, right? So this is what I would debug next. Is this working the way we want? Because here it's saying we're using values from, like if I take this off, and we put this back on, see, I'm going to get the same value all the time, right?
Right.
So this is definitely where my problem lies.
I mean, is the last date, do you think that the last date is just something beyond where there are any sales? Like in this data set that's in dax.do?
Well, so now, well, but that's the thing is, again, let's start figuring out how to debug it, right? I get what you're asking questions on, but I'm trying to take it through an idea of saying, let's figure out how to debug this, right? So we narrowed down that like you were saying is we could have an issue with this last date. Let's start finding that out, right? So here's another thing we could do is we could produce a new measure. We'll call it customer last DTE, just because I don't want to name it the same as the function. And it's going to equal this right here to this point. So I should still be able to format up like something. What's not right? Oh, I got to put my comma back up here. Okay, so I format correctly. So now what I could do is put, actually I gotta put my brackets in here. And I could put in here, even though I call it user still, I'm gonna still call it, I'm gonna put in my measure of last DTE. See, so for each month, it is giving me the correct date, right? But it's hard to believe that there are actually no customers you know, in the sales table. I mean, you could be right, but I should have dates and period, right? So here's another thing that I could kind of do is I could come down and I could take my dates and period, and I could throw that underneath my evaluate, because this is going to return me a table, and evaluate expects a table. And I'm just going to hard code in here. Think of how I need to do this is going to be last date. There's a way I could put a date together. Yes. Okay, so I could do a date. I could put my date function in here, put in 2010, comma 07, comma 31, right? And I think that's going to be to that, to that. Okay, so now that's matching what I have here. So now if I just run last date must specify a column. So I can't do that. As always, I stump myself on how I do my debugging.
Last time, didn't you make, I thought you just added
But actually,
brackets.
well, hang on, because I could specify, I could take last date out of this, right? Because I just have to give the date column a start date and the interval, right?
Right.
So now this should return me a table. Actually, I ran the whole thing. So, right. So this is returning me what I expect, right? It's a table of dates starting at the 1st of July all the way through, right? So this, and we could use this to kind of test your theory.
Right. Yeah.
Of
If
what
it's like the
happens if
5th
I
of-
put in, you know, what we're all looking forward to, July 4th, right?
Yeah.
And if I run select it now, so you see, yes, it did go back that in that range.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Makes
So
sense.
if you run this and you have a particular day on your axis, then yes, it's going to go a month prior to that. So it's going to be kind of like a running
Yeah.
list. What's our active users? You know, number of active
Yeah.
users each day.
Yeah.
So now we know we're getting something right here. So our only thing is we seem to be.
Is it related to the value in that customer key? Are you saying the customer key is 1? What's the purpose of 1 in that, on that line?
It's part of the sum x.
Okay.
So the sum x, remember the first parameter is a table,
Yes.
and that's what this table is going to provide, is the values of customer key, and then it's going to sum the value of 1 together for each row.
Okay.
And is it correct? What we've determined is that the way we were running it, that was getting no rows to sum. That's what it was telling us.
That's
When it went
what
to
that's what it seems to be happening, because we know we're getting the right amount of dates. This modifier seems correct. So, you know, what in this data set does sales look like? Oops, that's not what I wanted. Is we could hit the more button here, and we could say preview data. We have our date key. So we could produce yet another table to kind of filter this down. So let's comment out this evaluate. Let's comment out all of this so that when I hit run all by accident. So I could do an evaluate, calculate table. And the table I want to calculate is going to be off of sales. And I'm going to give it a filter because we know this worked. So I'm going to go ahead and give it this as a filter. And I'm going to close out my calculate table, run. And it's for whatever reason. So let's go back and do preview data again, see what data is in here. We definitely have stuff for 2007. So let's comment out this line. We'll uncomment out this. And we'll change this to say 207. Right, so we ended up debugging data more than anything else, but kind of interesting. They didn't put any sales in there all the way through the years that they have. Now, if we run this, so we get values.
Wow, that's a resolution. It is somewhat anticlimactic. Like,
like, it worked from the beginning, but our data set didn't have
Yeah.
data, but we didn't know that.
yeah, oh boy.
Good job, Kevin.
You got it. We all knew that. We were just waiting for you to stop.
Yeah, you just wanted me to find that answer. But we answered some of the other questions that you had and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
This-
for sure.
This is a great little tool that they provided, the SQL BI guys provide, to help you see, DAX and without having this, like you don't have to open up Power BI and produce your own little model and stuff like that. They have this popular model out there, this Contoso model, and then what they use in their DAX guide for all the different videos. So it helps you come out here and do this type of stuff to help debug and see what things, really should look like.
Hey, Kevin, going back to line 4 and the question about the 1, because I had that same question.
Mhm.
It's telling it to, like, what if you put a 2 there or a 5? What will it do?
It's gonna multiply this number by that number, right? So it's gonna sum up this value for each row that exists in value in this table.
Okay.
So, okay, so let me just put 10 in there because that's simple, right? So we'll see these same numbers, but we're gonna get a 0 on the end of each one, right?
Oh, did I sneeze on Mike?
Yep.
I'm sorry
Bless
about
you.
that.
That's okay.
Bless you.
Right. So it's summing up 10 for every row that was here.
Okay, so as a default, you have to put the 1. It's not like it's implied somehow.
Well, you have to put what you want summarized.
But it's just a reminder that this is accounting. It's just like a sort of
Distinct
left-handed.
counts.
Yeah, it's a distinct count. Like I want to say left-handed way of counting. I am left-handed, so I don't mean that so negatively. But it, like intuitively, you're just counting the damn distinct values. But they wanted to make this point that counting distinct values is slow. So here's another way that might be faster. And it's confusing to do a count using a sum. That's what Michelle's fundamentally confusing. It is counting things, but it's using sum because apparently that could be faster.
Yes. So I could come in here. That's a good way of explaining it.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't really explain it as much as point to why it's not intuitive. Like it's not really fundamentally an attempt to add things. It's really an attempt to count things using a tool that adds. It's just.
See, so I could put in here distinct count.
Do you still need values?
Yeah, because I got to give it.
Oh, just Wait, to
Values is going to give me the list as well, but yeah, I could take values out. And I could say distinct count sales customer key, right? With all the same filters, and I'm going to get the exact same answer.
With the point being that writing it that way is not as efficient or performant.
Depending on how much it in larger models and everything, that is correct. In smaller models, you probably won't notice a difference. See, so I get the exact same answer. But now, if I put in here 2,
I would put it in 2.8.
you could do that.
That's just flown.
And I run, see, I get a totally different value here. Because it's summing for each one of the 1,197 rows.
It's 2.8 plus 2.8 plus 2.8 plus
right.
2.8 plus 2.8 plus 2.8
Yep.
plus 2.8 1,907 times.
Yep.
Thank
And
you.
then another way of writing the exact same thing would be, if I put values back in here again, and I change this to count rows.
What's the difference between count and count rows there?
Well, we could try that next. We could look at,
Right.
this has the number of rows, right? Over here, if you notice, there's the DAX guide information comes up. So I could take this off to just count. So it sounds to me like one's going to count blanks and one count rows will count blanks and count will not count the blank.
Okay.
So probably either one would work in the way we're doing this. This one should have been named distinct count. This one is with count. So now if we oops. Ooh, it really didn't work.
Whoa.
That was pretty. What's off?
Alarm bells just went off in Italy.
Do you have an extra parentheses there? Do you have both of them ended? No, you need.
I need this one removed.
Yeah.
Set the column ID.
This is a great tool.
Oh, so I
wish it-
think let's see. Oh, because this is returning a table where this will count any table, I think. Yeah, because the input to count was a column ID, but the input to count rows is a table. And since I've already done values here,
Okay.
that's the reason why. So now run. See, we're getting the same values all the way across. So 3 ways of writing the exact same measure.
That's great. Look, we ran up against the top of the hour.
Yes, we did.
Debugging takes time, don't it?
It sure does. This is why it's great to have tools and know some of the tools to do it, right? So we didn't make it very far, but you know, maybe everybody, these are just kind of, you know, a couple other slides. And if you want to do the lab, there wasn't much here, right? There was questions. these are all the different time intelligence functions. You may have seen them. We don't have to go through each one of them. You could search for time intelligent functions for DAX, and you'll see what each one of these things do. And then we'll call module 5 done. And if y'all want to do the lab for next week, and then we'll get into module 6 next week, and maybe we could wrap it up between 6 and 7.
I think that's a fair trade-off. We spent so much time doing that it's fair to ask us to, on our own, do the rest of this and do the lab. At least I'm
All
speaking
right.
for myself. I don't know.
So I'm going to stop sharing. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.